All right, and we are in and going. Episode 33. After our great interview with Aaron Fields, we've got another with fire service wise. Like this is the dude, another one of the dudes that we've had some guys in here that have know some things about some things, and retired Captain Dennis LeGear from Oakland, as well as many other places, going to be our guest today. Just doing some, your credential list is impressive. Just listening to the questions, the people that are into the things that you're into, like the nerds, we are going to nerd out. So, myself, Captain Phil Marchand here again. Missing to my right is one of the most saltiest guys I know, Devin Shipper. He was not skipping leg day today, so he's just hitting it hard. So he was unable to attend us with us today. However, in his seat, newly hired or not hired, but I guess in a now position full time Sergeant Bluff Fire Chief Anthony Gall was a guest with us here, a year ago or more or something like that. So Anthony's going to be hanging out with us today for the interview and stuff. So, yeah, so Dennis, we're gonna break it down. We kind of got a list of our questions and stuff, and I know some of your interviews and things that I've listened to and stuff. They get right into the nozzle stuff and everything, but we got a little
Yeah.
bit different format. We want to know about Dennis, or how you got to being Laguerre the nozzle guy and stuff with the inch and 3/16 nozzle, more so than talking about the nozzle itself, because you're just at the end of the day, you're just a dude that knows some things and started like, I don't know. I'm curious, like how do you get to the position you're in? You're just because you're just a guy that had an idea, thought outside the box. So let's roll it back, and we're going to start from the beginning. Just, I mean, what's your vibe? Where'd you grow up? Path to the fire service, high school. Like, let's break it down.
So I grew up in the Bay Area of California, which is San Francisco Bay Area. I was actually born in San Francisco. I don't remember very much of growing up there. We were out of there by the time I was five or so. I lived in a place called the Sunset in the San Francisco, and it's kind of like a cruel joke. If you live in the Sunset, you probably never see a sunset. It's just like it's in the fog belt. And
Okay.
my father, who's been passed away for a while now. He was born in 36. He married a woman from the Mediterranean island of Malta. So I'm half Maltese, and my dad was half Scot, half Irish. So I'm kind of like a European mutt.
Yeah, like pretty
Um,
good
I'm
mix.
first I'm first generation here. My mom couldn't handle the fog. I think she was ready to strangle my father, and moved us out to a place called Walnut Creek. And basically, it was walnut trees and creeks. Now it's one of the more wealthy communities in America. It's kind of like a well heeled suburb of Oakland. People do commute to San Francisco from Walnut Creek. It's probably about 20 miles out of San Francisco, 10 miles out of Oakland. I went to all public schools growing up. Um, um, they're kind of a little hardship. My elementary school was uh, first grade through sixth grade, but when I got to the sixth grade, the school district decided to move sixth grade to the middle school. So I never got to be king of elementary of the
Yeah.
elementary school. So then I went to a middle school that was sixth, seventh, and eighth. Again, it's a community. It's fairly well heeled. The education I would say that I got was probably, in the upper echelon for public schools, top 5%, maybe even top 1%. And I went to a high school, Northgate High School, um, which it was a building that lacked windows. When they built
Oh.
it, they thought if we build a school with no windows, the students would pay attention more. And yeah, it was like a
That's
forest
like
of office cubicles.
I was gonna say that's like, isn't that like, don't they call that a prison at some, like, I mean, it's
So I've never checked into it, but apparently some of the designs were done kind of pro bono, and the rumor always was that one of the architects that worked on it had done some time in prison, and it really did feel like a prison. It had asbestos problems. My junior year, they kicked us out for asbestos remediation. And I actually went back to my elementary school campus as a junior in high school. And they had us in they had us in like trailers. And I took auto shop all 4 years, even though you don't have a driver's license when you're a freshman or sophomore. I loved mechanical things. I always had a mechanical mindset. My father had no mechanical chops. Like he was a very good writer. I think he wanted to be like the next great American novelist or something. That didn't pay off. But my grandfather on my mother's side was a self-taught engineer, and I kind of feel like I've self-taught myself a lot of mechanical engineering stuff, and that might be a little bit of genetics in there. He built a lot of the roads and tunnels and bridges in Malta with no formal education, and a lot of them, are just still standing. Like they're nothing wrong with them. So that's kind of my K through 12th grade. So my father was kind of a jack of all trades, didn't hold down a single career, but he was a reservist in the military for a good amount of time. He was an air crew member on a helicopter. So I was exposed to the military fairly early. My dad would go out on deployments and floats in the Pacific Fleet. And, like many military families, you miss your parents when they're gone. So I liked the community service aspect of his military career. I didn't like going all over the world, and not being able to put roots down. So I kind of knew I wanted to do something, semi altruistic, good for society. I didn't know really what that was going to take shape. So I graduated high school in 92. I went to a place called Las Madonas College. It had a fire science program, and it had a nursing and paramedic program. And I was thinking about being a doctor. Wasn't the greatest at getting good grades in high school. I probably C plus, B minus kind of grade average. Mainly because I was probably lazy and not super motivated. And I got to college and my grades went way up because now I'm studying something that's going to lead to some sort of career. So I took the medical prerequisites, A&P and chemistry and whatever. And I had some cross pollination with the paramedics and nursing students, and started running into people that were pursuing the fire science program. And I always admired firefighters. I remember playing with the little plastic firefighting men and stuff. And we had a fireplace in our living room that was old school, like 60s type design, where it was open on both sides. So like one had a formal dining room, the other was like a sunken living room. And I remember putting like ladders up and having like the little men crawl over, and they would melt. Oh, this guy's injured. Off the ladder you go. So I remember having an affinity to fire service, but I have no direct tie to the fire service. No uncle in the fire service, no friends' fathers in the fire service, nothing like that. Get to this JC, start hanging out with some of the people in the fire science program. I was looking at paramedicine. Obviously, some of the same prerequisites went over the paramedicine side. Then I needed some like general education and electives. So I took like introduction to fire science, that kind of stuff. And I started going like, man, I don't want to go to school for 8 years. I didn't even like high school. And I'm like, wow, this looks like a pretty good fit for me, the fire. There was a police academy there too. That didn't take long of interacting with those guys to know that I was never going to be a cop, like I had no interest. So long story short, I decided to get an AS degree in fire science while I was pursuing my undergraduate medical stuff. And by the time I was done getting all the AS requirements to get a fire science degree, I was like, I don't want to be a doctor. I want to be a fireman. And I started, I didn't need anything as a child. I never wanted anything like food or clothing. My parents provided all that stuff for me, but they weren't wealthy. They were both working class. So I started working at about 14. I remember because we had to get a children's work permit. And I remember I worked at a gas station for a while. I lied about my age, and they asked me to move the tow truck between two stations once, and I disclosed that I wasn't 16 and got fired.
Yeah.
Which like I get why that happened. And then I ended up working for a grocery store. So I was a courtesy clerk, bagger, and then around 18, I made checker. I worked as a checker through um, my fire science college degree there. I left. I nailed it out real quick. I was done by 94. Testing for Cal Fire. Back then it was called California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. And that was my first full-time seasonal work as a firefighter. So, 94, 95, 96, those years. And, and, uh, it's funny. Like now you look at career fires in the wildland environment and they're happening like every year in California. There's a
Yeah.
fire north, south, and west. I can't imagine what it's like to be a seasonal firefighter now because they just have so much exposure to these huge conflagration fires. I did go to a couple big conflagration fires. One was called the Old Fire. Those were my first experiences with people being injured at work. There was a Glendale fireman that was burned over very badly at one of a Malibu fire in '97. Actually, he was kind of reported like he wasn't going to make it, and he ended up surviving, but severely disabled. Had to retire and that kind of stuff. So I really enjoyed working in the forestry.
And this was kind of like in your early 20s, like
Yeah,
right after
actually, it's
college.
kind of funny. I don't know if I should say some of this stuff, but I think the statute of
Yeah,
limitations
so
is
like, yeah, that's way gone now, right?
statute of limitations is gone. I was
Yeah.
hired before I was 21, and during one of the seasons, I turned 21 on shift, and the battalion chief came and rode up, and they told me, "Yeah, take the night off." And there was a bar down the street in the service area, and I was sent down there to,
Yeah.
go enjoy my birthday. So
Nice.
um, it was kind of later in the year. The fuel package was dry, but those kind of I worked in Tulare County. There was 38 stations. There were, I think, only 10 or 12 Schedule B or wildland stations. The rest were contracted by the county for structural fire protection. And there was a thing called a Schedule A Advanced Firefighter Packet, and I had a really, really, really good company officer exposure at Cal Fire. This guy named Ray Grimm. He's still with us. He still lives down there in Tulare. I see him like some of my Facebook posts still, though I haven't talked to him directly in quite, like 10, 20 years. But he great leadership example, and really made me want to stay in Cal Fire. You know, and on the wildland side, you don't run too many medicals, and like you could, you know, plan your life a little bit around Cal Fire in the state. You could go anywhere. Like if you wanted to be in a busy structural company or tiller or whatever, you could go down to Riverside County where they have like 101 stations and thousands of employees. Or if you wanted to be maybe more up in the timber, you could go. So there was helicopters, the air program.
So
So I was very, go ahead.
is Cal Fire, is that like just like a conglomerate of, I mean, that's just like a general term. It's not like Cal Fire, like your t-shirts don't all say Cal Fire. Is this just like a giant conglomerate of everything and it just falls under a Cal Fire umbrella?
So Cal Fire, when I was hired, there was 5 regions, and then a north and south. They've kind of broken that down just to north and south now, and they kind of had this idea that they were going to like basically eat the world fire service wise in California. So this is going to sound crazy. The seasonal shift was 96 hours on, so you were on for 4 days straight, and you didn't get paid between midnight and 5 o'clock unless you ran a call or your sleep was interrupted. They called that earning your nickel. so, uh, so they had a 72-hour. The fully paid full timers were on a 72-hour shift. So Cal Fire could go challenge county fire departments and put it in a state bid packet and provide more fire protection for less spend because the shift was longer.
Hmm.
And they absorbed a lot of uh, fire departments and county fire departments on contract in like the late 80s to mid 90s. So it's a huge organization. I really can't say anything negative about Cal Fire other than the shift in the pay.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do anything you wanted. Like if you wanted to be on a busy, basically kind of inner city, run your butt off. There is some place down south that's a contract city that you could go to, or if you wanted to be in the aviation. So long story short, it was that affirmative action kind of period in the fire service. There were way more people applying for jobs than there were jobs. It was much more competitive when I was trying to get hired compared to what it is today. To give you an example, like I think in Oakland when I took the test, like it was well north of 5,000 people applying for 20 jobs. Like so.
Wow.
Um, some of this, I'm not arrogant. Some of this is luck based, right? I had a good test. I had a good interview. And for some reason, I, got selected. There were plenty of friends that I made through the testing processes that I felt were as good as candidates as me, or in sometimes maybe this guy was stronger physically or this guy was stronger mentally. But I felt like you could be totally qualified, test extremely well, and try for years, and you might never get a job, at least in California.
Hmm.
That being said, I tested all over the Western United States. I tested in Nevada, Utah, um, Oregon, and Washington. But getting on with Cal Fire gave me that experience. And Oakland had the Oakland Hills Fire in 1991. Yeah, the earthquake was 89. So 1991
Yeah.
was the Hill Fire. And I took the 95 test and was hired basically in 97. My academy started January of 1998. And they were looking for people with wildland experience. And they were kind of starting to think about they might go ALS. I was kind of me and another class right before me, and I think maybe a class right after me was the last classes of just EMT firefighter in Oakland. But back to Cal Fire for a second. I loved the dozer operator's
Hmm.
position. So like if I hadn't gotten over a municipal job, I would have been a dozer operator for sure. They get captain's pay. They're called HFEOs. They're actually at night. They don't have to stay in the station as long as they're within, I think, 20 minutes or 30 minutes of their dozer. And they get to pick their own seasonal firefighter to swamp for them. So I swamped for a dozer operator for part of the year because his swamper got injured. And I was like, these guys have it made. Like, they around that time they added climate control to the dozers, so they had air conditioning, and they would sit in there, listen to rock and roll music, and
Yeah.
just fight fire.
And
Never
just
run a medical. They're really like on their own. So like, and they get to pick the seasonal they want to run the utility vehicle that chases the dozer, and they're
yeah.
often ordered as single resource. So I mean, and in winter, most of those guys, after they get done with winter maintenance, they just build hot rods and stuff. Probably not like that anymore, but that's what I was exposed to.
Well, yeah,
So
and that's what. So explain this seasonal thing, because I was kind of trying to figure out, watching Only the Brave and like doing a little research on Yarnell and the Granite Mountain
yeah,
hot shots and stuff in that department. Where after that fire, the Yarnell fire, that those guys, they never replaced the wildland division of that department. That was it, because they had a structural side and wildland side. So to me, it's like I always kind of wonder, what do you do? I guess when the fire season's done, then what? I mean, are you laid off until fire season comes again? Do you
so
do
this is
you
kind
go
of a
on? I mean,
yeah,
how does that work?
this is kind of like a hot button issue now because obviously you get laid off and you get your salary out of unemployment insurance, which is coming out of the state coffers anyway. And I think someone did a study recently. It's like it'd probably a wash or close to a wash just to keep them on at their seasonal pay year round. And now they do like floods and swift water, and the state of California has more and more people and more rural areas, so there's that argument. But typically, the more senior you were, the longer you could stay employed. So they want a seasonal worker, seasonal firefighter at Cal Fire when I was there couldn't work more than 9 months. And so you would work 9 months, they'd lay you off for three, and they'd bring you back. Now, some of those 9 month positions, like down in Riverside County, they're just on a structure engine. They work 9 months, they're off. They collect unemployment for 3 months, they go back to work. Most seasonal Cal Fire employees probably worked, depending on the fire season, like 4 to 6 months, something like that. They get brought in like May or April, depending on the fuel package, and the senior guys would probably be laid off by early October, November. Obviously, we have wildland fires now in the middle of January. Palisades and Eaton happen this year, the second week of January. So, fire season really never ends now in Southern California. I'm not going to talk about politics, but I will say my experience with growing a garden, which I've grown a garden. My mom grew up on an island, so they grew their own food. They slaughtered their own rabbits and chicken, like just kind of
Hmm.
that rural lifestyle. So she got me into growing a garden when I was like, 10 or 11. So like I've grown a garden in basically the same geographical location for 40 years. And I have tomatoes that are still ripening. I haven't had a hard freeze yet. So like it's definitely seems warmer and drier, in the state of California. And I think that can be looked at in the fire. Obviously, there's other, fuel management, all the
Yeah,
other things, there's all
that's
those facets.
yep, that would have been my question is like what difference have you seen? Because you said, the guys now seem like they're working so much more and stuff, the fires or whatever. Like, what's the difference from the fire service aspect that you've seen? Why is that? Why are we, why are
Yeah,
they having more
we've
fires more
we've
often
had
and bigger and
we've
stuff?
had way more people move out into these beautiful places they want to live, like kind of out in nature. So there's just like if you work in an urban environment, like when I worked in Oakland had a heavy fire duty, and people would ask me like, well, why does Oakland have such a heavy fire rate? I mean, it's socioeconomic, right? It's like
Hmm.
poverty seems to breed fire. People are tired, they go to sleep with pots on the stove. There's all the
Yep.
drug stuff, and then on top of that, we had three cultures in or ethnic groups in Oakland that did a lot of cooking with deep frying stuff, and
Hmm.
so we had a lot of cooking fires that get into the buildings. Then we had a lot of unpermitted remodeling, so wiring and stuff. So like everything that you need to breed fire in a city, Oakland has culturally and socioeconomically. Well, the state of California, as a state, everything you need to make wildland fires bad have come together. Like I think we can say there's less rainfall. Um, like these wind-driven fires that happen every October and November. Luckily, we had some early rain this year. We used to always get rain September, October, and so we always had dry lightning in
Hmm.
October and November all over California. But the fuel package would already be wet. It seems like those winter storms now come. The first significant rainfall is usually like maybe first week of November or second week of November. So we have the same wind events we always had in October, except
Right.
now the power lines are falling into tinder dry
Dryer packages.
thing that
Yeah.
it hasn't been pre-treated by God or Mother Nature, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
So, I happen to be in a little soundproof box here. One of the companies in California that is trying to do wildland mitigation, they're trying to underground all of the power infrastructure in California, come up with like monitors on power lines. So when they get a certain amount of sway in them, you can detect it and you can depower parts of the grid,
Hmm.
forecasting. But yeah, these guys that are seasonals now, they're making, career level conflagration type fires, multiple times a season.
Yeah.
I think we actually, if you minus Eaton and Palisades out of this year's fire season in California, I actually think it was not dramatic. Don't hold it to me. I don't track it, but you could go
Yeah.
look. I don't think this fire season had been particularly bad. And the reason I can say that is there wasn't smoke all over the Bay Area, this season. So yeah, I mean, um, they're gonna have to attack it from all directions. You know, they got to do fuel mitigation. They got to hold people accountable for defensible space. They got to hire more firefighters. Seasonal should probably go the way of the dodo board. They probably should staff up these fire engines year round. They are Gavin Newsom, our governor, who happens to be our governor now, but it could be another guy in the future. They've just I think they authorized hiring 4,000 firefighters or
Wow.
something ridiculous, and it's so many firefighters are being hired. There's an Ione Fire Academy in the center of the state, which is run by Cal Fire, and it's their main training location. They've stood up 2 satellite training grounds because, they're not hiring just 10, 20, 50 here. They're hiring hundreds, at a time. I want to say that the budget for Cal Fire now is like well into the several $1 billion, like $2 billion.
Wow. That's crazy.
Well, clearly your time with Cal Fire helped make you very well rounded as you grew and came into the city. How and when did you decide, all right, it's time? You got into Oakland. Tell us a little bit about what that was like getting into Oakland from Cal Fire, the differences, and then you've definitely progressed and you got to see quite a bit during your career in Oakland in
Yeah,
different roles and responsibilities. So tell us a little bit about that.
yeah. So right before I went to Cal Fire, I took a joint test in the Fresno Valley, and it was like several fire departments were going to hire off it. I did very well on it, and I ended up getting pulled by a county fire department called Kings County, and it's 12 stations. A lot of the engines were single driver with volunteer or paid on call backup, and then a lot of stations were two, and a couple of stations three. I was there about 2 years. The hydraulics, everybody knows me for, really started there. They had a Kings County hydraulic text that was very detailed, very good driver operator program. In fact, they had tractor drawn water tenders, and so you needed a full Class A commercial license, and all of their water tenders were like 13-speed road rangers with like 2-speed axles. So like I've got exposed to stuff that most people wouldn't get exposed to driving and operating in that county environment. Um, I I I was offered a job in the city of Santa Barbara and Oakland at the same time. I grew up in the Bay Area. If I could work for Contra Costa or Oakland, that would have been my goal. So obviously, I went to Oakland. I will say this, I don't know if a lot of structure guys want to hear this. As my movement towards the city occurred, the actual physical labor involved went down and pay went up. Hours went down and pay went way up.
Yeah.
So these poor seasonal guys and wildland guys should probably get paid a lot more money. And unfortunately, I think they're going to have way more work-related cancers and injuries based on, like if you go to a WUI fire and you have 200 or 300 houses on fire, I think in Oakland, at the height of the fire, a house was being consumed every second. It's
Wow.
just
That's
power walls,
insanity.
lithium ion stuff. You're
Yeah,
not
all
in an
that stuff.
SCBA,
That's yeah.
all of that shit. So
I-
those famous fires like in New York, the telephone fire, or like there was a cancer belt from this fire or whatever.
right.
I am concerned about these seasonal employees, and this happens a lot. Like you'll have a seasonal private contractor hire guys to be firefighters, and there was a helicopter crash in 2007 that killed a bunch of private young firefighters, kind of like Yarnell, that kind of deal. No disability pension, nobody
Mm.
taking care of their family, and that kind of stuff. So I do have a little bit of a push with among fire service channels to try to give wildland firefighters the same pay and benefit and packages that structural firefighters
Well,
get.
some of
So
that cancerous presumption and things like that. I guess that's one aspect. I guess I really never with the wildland. You think, well, it's cleaner smoke because it's trees and grass and stuff burning, but you forget about, oh yeah, and then it comes against a structure and it's still a house burn. It's still a structure fire, and they don't have the turnout gear that we're wearing or the SCBA or anything like that, and they're breathing in the same stuff. just without the
Yeah.
protection.
And
So
probably don't have a chance to clean and wash their gear on a
yeah,
regular
because
basis.
you're
when
still
they're out
like
there.
going on to the next house or keep going on, and just following it and
Yeah.
chasing it. So yeah, there is no
Those,
deconning and everything else.
those types of incidents, there's no decon. I remember in 96 or 97, I did 31 days straight,
Wow.
at a conflagration. They canceled everybody's days off in the whole Southern unit. And again, to speak to the benefits of working with CAL FIRE, I was in Prado staging down in Riverside County when my interview for Kings County came up. And I went over to my strike team leader. I said, "Hey, I have this interview. It's a hiring interview. It's a chief's interview. I'm going to miss." And they checked me out of the fire camp. They gave me a utility vehicle and they said, "Go up there, take your interview, and come back." And they let me go. So I showed up my interview. I was like filthy. I was
Yeah.
working. I was like green jeans, just completely covered in mud and dirt. Like my face was clean, but again, a little bit of luck involved. The guy liked me that interviewed me. Len Chesmore was the fire chief, and I got hired there. So, so I got rural wildland experience. Then I got county experience, and then I got to Oakland. In Oakland, obviously, it's a true kind of a little bit of an East Coast city on the West Coast. Tight lot sizes, all wood construction mainly. So it's a challenging work environment. There is definitely vertical walk up multiple family dwellings that are unsprinklered, center hallway type deal. So I feel very blessed and lucky to have these three kind of distinct experiences in the fire service. A state agency that does everything, a county agency in a rural environment, and then this urban environment. When I was learning more about hydraulics and looking at company libraries in Oakland, I came across the Kings County hydraulics book, except instead of Kings County on the front of it, it said LA County on it. And lo and behold, all King County did was rip the LA County cover off the hydraulic, like stick the Kings County one on there. So I essentially was LA County hydraulics controlled. And that also was an important lesson, right? You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like this county fire department basically took what LA County developed and made it their own, which is something I think the fire service can benefit from. There's too many people trying to do too many things, and you use the word outside the box earlier around like the inch and 3/16 for some of the stuff I was involved with, and I would push back. I would say that those ideas that have been successful, like True ID hose, I invented the 2¼ inch hose size. Those aren't outside the box; they're firmly in the middle of the box, right? It's you're looking at like, hey, how can I get 2.5 inch flow that's more manageable and it's more mobile? It gives me better nozzle reach, and most fire departments have a staffing problem. Those are driving you to the center of the box. They're not driving you to outside of the box. And I would, it's not me that said this. I think it's a Navy SEAL or something said this, but the more time you spend in the box, the less likely you'll go outside of it. Your box will be more robust, a simple solution, right? So True ID 2¼ inch was like a no-brainer. And lo and behold, in my research around that hose size, it already had existed, like in the late 1900s, early 1900s. The problem is that steam pumpers back then really operated around 100 psi, and there was too much friction loss in it. So that's pretty much, they chose 2.5 to be supply and attack, but 2¼ inch hose existed at the very onset of the North American mechanized.
Well, that's what it sounded like. Is some of the things and some of the things that we're doing now, whether it's flow and move and just more water application, the nozzle sizes, hose sizes, and stuff. It's actually old, almost like old ideas that are just coming back, but actually work now because of modern equipment that we have and just a little bit more knowledge of understanding the why behind some of the stuff more so than, well, you're just going to go do this just because, but there's actually like, I don't know, science behind it. I don't know. It seems like some of the things they're old things that are just coming back for in the modern fire service.
Yeah, I think like you look at cooking, cooking textbooks, and you learn the primary ingredients, butter, sugar, eggs, flour for making a cake, and then you mess around with the ingredients to make, pound cake versus angel food cake or like whatever. But basically the fundamentals are the same. And the fire service, and I'm not a big EMS person, so we'll just stick to suppression of fires, whether it's wildland or structural. The fire service is really a society of moving water, and Ray says like a culture of extinguishment. You can't have a culture of extinguishment if you don't have good societal knowledge of how to move water. And most of the fires go out on tank or the first line or whatever. So when EMS kind of invaded the fire service, call volume wise, kind of in the 70s and early 80s, right around that same time, automatic handline nozzles and 5-inch hose were being introduced to the fire service. And then if you look at an automatic nozzle and 5-inch hose, you go like, well, for the vast majority of fires, you're not going to have a water supply issue. And the nozzle's over pumped, I'll just half bail it. Who cares what's coming out the front of it? And
Right.
It'll extinguishment, right? So there's a difference in the delta between fires that you've successfully extinguished and fires that you've entered, right? You want to up your batting average. And I think essentially that average fell in the 80s, over time, as medical responses, all risk mitigation, hazmat, everything came in. And what we've really seen now, probably because of the internet, and I'm not a big generational hater, like I feel that millennials and Gen Zs, like when I'm teaching and instructing, they're slightly different people. They might ask more questions or whatever, but I kind of feel that some of this progress that's being made over the last decade and a half is because these generations that want to know why came in and they asked why, and they got tired of hearing, well, shut up, that's just the way it is. And then it's a different group of people being hired. A lot of people have like mechanical engineering degrees or advanced degrees, and they've come back to the fire service. When I joined the fire service, I had classmates that were just basically out of high school and a day laborer or labor of some sort, and the fire department trained them up on everything, right? So I think there's been a lot of this progress around hose sizes and pumps, and this research that has been going on is kind of a reinvigoration. I would almost say that the fire service kind of had a suppression dark ages in North America. I've never said this before publicly, so bear with me, but I think 78 to like 90, 88, like nothing good was going on in the fire service as far as suppression and equipment. Everything the manufacturers got their teeth sunken into people, and they're like, hey, I can make your life easier. And, little things would get missed. Like when you buy a 5-inch hose system, they always give you a portable hydrant with it. And everyone's seen that device. It's it's a 5-inch Storts on one end, and it's a tri-gated Y with 3 discharges on it, and it has a pressure relief valve on it. Well, when you bought a 5-inch hose system and the salesman was out there, they would say, hey, 5-inch hose is like moving the hydrant. Well, it was like moving the hydrant. You put your portable hydrant on the fire ground and you lay out to your hydrant and you pump back to the portable hydrant, and the rigs on the fire team get the water out of the portable hydrant. So now you've actually used the horsepower of the 5-inch rig to move the hydrant to the fire scene. Well, over time, you don't get a lot of big conflagration fires. People are laying 5-inch from the hydrant to get their puny fire out, and they started going, well, 5-inch is fine laying forward. And then people forget what that portal hydrant was for, and then all of a sudden now you have major cities, you have a conflagration, the 5 nearest hydrants are being used, everybody's driven from the hydrant to the fire, nobody's pumping the hydrants, and you're giving up half your fire flow, and you've turned every other vehicle that's going to the fire into a city bus instead of a pumping device, right? So fire engines, basically three things: a chemical wagon, a hose wagon, and a steamer. The big outlet on a hydrant is called a steamer for a reason, right? You're supposed to push water, not pull water.
Mm-hmm.
So that chemical wagon attack, that tank attack, is extremely powerful. But the hose wagon component, you're supposed to lay forward or back or split lay. There's flying lays. There's all sorts of things that are in textbooks of the 50s and 60s that were just essentially forgotten about. And now those kids, I shouldn't even call them kids anymore, like the millennials are in their 30s probably, and there's the millennials, they come in, they have the world at their fingertips on the internet. If you don't need everyone to be a geek, you just need one dude or one gal to be a geek and hopefully be fairly well liked and articulate. And then you can go out, Elkhart's done a fabulous job with flow meters and teaching people know your flow. I got that from Akron. There was a guy here, Ron Miles in California, that basically, like if I took what Ron taught me in the late 90s, early 2000s and inserted it in the Brass Tacks Hard Facts or Know Your Flow, it's the same exact information, except when I was learning it, it was not unique, but it was not as available as it is today, right? So some of this outperformance that we see now in the fire service is because things are more available. So
Yeah.
back to Oakland for a second.
No, great.
So I got to Oakland, and very early on in '99, we had a line of duty death, and it just happened to be a gentleman named Tracy Toomey. I grew up with his nephews, and I didn't really know him that well. I met him a couple times. And when I became an Oakland fireman, I remember like maybe 2 or 3 shifts before the line of duty death that took his life. He was like, "Oh man, I'm looking forward to working." He was working up in a retirement station right up in the hills, and he wasn't even supposed to be down on the flats. He would work overtime down in the flats, but he was a blacksmith off duty, and he built a lot of beautiful wrought iron fences and metalwork for people. And his tools got stolen one night from the firehouse. So he was actually supposed to retire that year, I think, and he was working some overtime to try to make up the money to get his tools back. So it's kind of a sad story. But the reason I bring this up is, I felt some affinity to the family. I knew everybody that was involved. There was obviously going to be a board of inquiry. I was a new member. I had met Jay Camella early on. Jay Camella was pretty aggressive about mentoring people when I got on in the fire department. So that's basically how I ran into Jay. And this line of duty death happened. We got extremely lucky as an agency. There were 3 members actually pinned, and Tracy died on scene from asphyxiation. The other 2 members were successfully extricated. But it was a taxpayer with a bar below, and there was a collapse of the floor onto the first floor, and that bar held up one side of the floor. So it was like a lean-to, and there was a void space. And in that void space, there was essentially 2 companies of engine members that actually came crawling out of there. So it could have been much worse. But the reason I bring this up is I was like, well, I'd like to be involved somehow with the board of inquiry. I know I'm a new member. And they're like, well, what do you know? Like, what are you pretty good at? And I had gone to some fires by then in Oakland, and I had come from a fire department that flowed around 150 gallons a minute pretty regularly. And the 1.5-inch hose that Oakland was using and the way the pump chart was pumped, the average flow I knew was like probably 90 to 110 gallons, something like that. And I could tell, like going to these fires, I had experience putting out kitchen fires or whatever at a slightly higher flow rate. I was like, it's much easier to flow and move. And by the way, default in Oakland was flow and move. Like it was, it's 1.5-inch hose. It's only 100, 110 gallons a minute. Nozzle reaction's like 50. It was very, very mobile. But I remember several times like being in a bigger space and like kind of holding the fire in check, and then another 1.5 inch kind of comes up next to me and okay, we got this now. And I would say some of that's still true today, like in a place like DC, right, where you have multiple small lines going into these tight urban structures. And, if the IC doesn't say something, you'll end up with 4 lines in the building, because Oakland was very much that place where they were extremely good at deploying a hand line quickly, getting it flowing quickly, and getting it moving to the seat of the fire. And seeing it, how much of it was a tempo and pace, and how successful they were at extinguishing these fires and flow and move and all that kind of stuff, was very impressive as someone coming from a rural and CAL FIRE background. And when I was hired, there was no RIT company yet. So this is going to sound crazy too. The first alarm was just 2 engines and a ladder company and a chief. And the senior captain would be in charge till the chief got there. And that's what they sent. Like, it was 2 engines and a ladder. And sometimes the chief would ask for an extra engine. And a second alarm was duplicated, 2 engines in a truck. But it wasn't like if you had a confirmed fire, they didn't automatically strike a second for more personnel. And there was some weird things too that, looking back, it's kind of, you could be on the east end, which is a poorer end of the city, and there'll be like one 4-story walk-up building with maybe like 20 units of floor. And on the east end, that would get 2 engines and a ladder and a chief, like an apartment fire. But then if you went to a wealthier area of the city with more of those large buildings tied together, they had a thing called a lake box. And I think it was like 4 engines, a ladder, and a chief. And often they would add a ladder. So it looked much more like a East Coast box. And I'm like, dude, it's the same fucking building. Like, how do you get 4 engines, 2 ladders, and 2 chiefs here, and we can have the same fire on the east end and only get. So that being said, I also benefited from that, that everybody worked on an Oakland Fire ground when I was hired. Like, there's not enough people to be hiding, right? And there was 8 people assigned to engines and 4 people assigned a ladder. 3 of the ladders had 5 and a chief. So essentially, PAR was extremely easy, and personal accountability was extremely easy. There was only what is that? That's 8 plus 4, 12 in the chief. There was only 13 people on scene for the vast majority of my first alarm fires when I was a nozzle firefighter or riding a ladder truck. Being involved in that board inquiry, I chose something that I thought would be no problem. I was like, hey, I'll help you. I think we should flow more water. Like, we could, go to a 3/4 inch smoothbore tip, or we could go to we had 125 at 100 nozzles, but we weren't pumping them. Like, I could tell the pump chart was wrong. I could tell the friction loss was wrong. And I thought, as a new employee, if I stick to measuring stuff and I show them, like, nobody will argue with me, it's just math. Well, that was incorrect. Everybody was upset. And then it was, the weird thing about it is I found the pump chart, the 1979 pump chart. They were doing friction loss per length, like an East Coast Fire Department. And then for some reason, I think it has to do with hydraulic mining and that kind of stuff, west of the Mississippi, definitely west of Colorado. Mm-hmm. Everything was done in 100-foot lengths instead of 50-foot lengths. And there was a lot of fire departments that had 100-foot lengths of hose on the West Coast because couplings were expensive. Famously, you had Aaron Fields on. Seattle, their 1 3/4 is 100-foot lengths, right? And if you talk to somebody like Aaron, I don't know if he's changed his opinion on it, but he's like, I don't want it to be like, I got to deal with another coupling. Why would I want to deal with another coupling? He does want their 2.5 to be 50-foot lengths for obvious reasons. But anyway, going through the board of inquiry, I had access to East Bay Mud, which is our water purveyor for the Bay Area. They provide water for about 2 million people in the East Bay. They're headquartered in Oakland. So any water supply issue or anything like that, I literally now had like engineers from the board of inquiry where I could just call and ask a question. There was a structural engineer named Charles Scawthorne that was hired to do the building collapse analysis, and he was tied to the UC Berkeley. So all of a sudden I had access to world-class, building engineers and stuff like that. And I'm a pretty friendly guy. I like writing people's numbers down and keeping in touch with them. And so, when somebody goes in the fire, like, man, a little bit about everything. Some of this is through that crucible of being in that Florida inquiry and trying to do something good for our fire department. And it definitely wasn't, just me. There was lots of people for a long period of time that were trying to get Oakland into a higher flow. Maybe not a bigger hose line, but a higher flow. So I kind of got hired. Two things really, again, luck. There was this tragic incident that opened the financial taps at the city. They basically set aside $1 million we had all different ages of hose, all different ages of nozzles and stuff. They knew it was a problem. They were going to fix it. We had really goofy shit. Like the ladder companies had Scott air bottles and the engine companies had MSA bottles. So like during the collapse, like you want to like bring a pack in to help somebody. It's like, are they on a ladder truck or are they on an engine? Like what pack? So, we got basically, slapped by OSHA. There was a lot of things. They looked at our equipment. It was old. Our engines were old. So right when I was hired, the internet boom was kind of, at its height, late 90s. They had an influx of money. So we were buying brand new rigs. There was money to buy hose and nozzles. So to be that new in a department 2 to 3 years on the job and be involved in, equipment specification stuff, mainly as a helper to Jay Camella. And then Daryl Liggins got hired like maybe a year or two after me. And then we kind of formed a friendship. And then a captain that really wanted to see these changes made battalion chief. And he eventually, by the end, was operations chief. So we essentially had a core group of individuals that really, for lack of a better term, we were kind of given the keys to the kingdom. Very, very controversial. Very, people were very upset about going 1 3/4 hose. We did have kinking issues. By the way, that's one of the reasons I built the back pressure device for Hen nozzles, right? Because even though we went to 7/8" smooth bores, and it was funny, I had figured out that a 200 at 75 fog nozzle is actually 160 at 50. And I showed the chief of the department, the operations chief, and everybody that was on the hose and nozzle committee. And I'm like, hey, let's get 7/8" tips. And for the guys that want to use a fog nozzle, we'll get this 200 at 75, but we'll just treat it as a 160 at 50. And the chief's like, I can't do that. Like, it's going to confuse people. So I was talking to Akron at the time. I said, hey, man, can you make a sticker that just says 160 at 50? Give me the same freaking nozzle. Don't change anything manufacturer. I just want a sticker that says, and they wouldn't do it. So we ended up in 150 at 50s and 7/8 in our small lines, an inch and an eighth in our large line. And we changed everything. We added bulk beds, we upgraded the pump chart, we said, hey, don't get a second line in service if the first line isn't appropriately staffed in the right place and came free. Dave McGrail came in the early 2000s and did the standpipe stuff. We went to 2.5-inch standpipe packs. Now, sometimes you got to know your audience. We have a lot of dry standpipes. We don't have a lot of PRVs, except in the fire pump equipped buildings. And they've been putting out these fires with 1.5-inch hose at 90 gallons a minute a long time. So that hybrid system, the thing that New York went to, that 2-inch lead length with 2.5. Well, through Jay, there was some New York firefighters, Andy Fredericks, Patty Brown. Again, this is kind of crazy luck, right? These people are legends, and I basically right time, right place, right luck to be friends with Jay and be introduced to all these people. But there were a lot of companies in New York, in the Bronx, that would use a 50-foot length of 1 3/4 as the last length of their standpipe attack at multiple family dwelling fires. And they just called it the apartment length. So, and I was like, we can do that here in Oakland too. So we ended up doing 100-foot bundle of 1 3/4. And then every engine got 3 bundles of 2.5, one with a nozzle on it. And if you went to a residential fire, 2 companies would merge together. You would bring 2 bundles each of 2.5 and 100-foot bundle of 1 3/4. So you could never add 1 3/4, 1 3/4, but you could use that 100 feet and still get good fire flow. And the idea was mine. The idea was I was trying to replicate the engine algorithm that you would normally have off the engine. Hey, I get to the fire floor, I pop up as a company officer. Oh, it's just an apartment fire. All right, it looks like a 250-foot stretch. Give me 3 bundles of 2.5. Put the 1 3/4 on it. Let's flake it out. Let's charge it. And let's get up there and put this fire out. Right. If I popped up and I was like, hey, the hallway's full of fire, or maybe let's say it's an old folks home and it's the commercial floor kitchen, or the rumpus room's on fire or whatever, I could just throw the 1 3/4 aside, and then we could just take the 4 bundles, 2.5, have a 200-foot standpipe evolution. So I was like, hey, we're replicating what we're replicating at the fire ground. And then I was like, okay, what else are we not replicating on the pump panel? Well, we need a pressure gauge, we need our own gate valve, and I need a drain. And people are like, why do we need a drain? Well, if your hose gets stuck under a fire door and gets charged and you don't have a drain, even if you turn the outlet off, you might have to get a knife out and stab the hose to get it to drain and get the door back open. So it was kind of in my mind thought, hey, like the standpipe, the SPO member, the person's standpipe outlet member, they should have at least the same advantages they have operating from a pumper. So give them their own gate so they can throw it on the outlet, they can flush through it. They'll open the standpipe outlet fully open only once, right? Set it and forget it. It's fully open. Close it with your gate valve. Put your elbow on there with a drain and your pressure gauge, and now essentially you have a replica of what you would have on a pumper. So around that time, I started meeting, Kurt, and Kurt was doing the same stuff. But long story short, over a 3 or 4 year period, when we're looking at run volumes, once we got people to understand how to mine kinks and advance and all this stuff came in, well, property loss went down with the same fire duty and also the number of second alarms. So it was just like, oh, well, like this makes sense. You get better at applying water. You get more focused. They were already extremely good, and now they have better equipment. It just was a force multiplier. So I was only a firefighter like 3 years, and probably half of that time in Oakland was on a ladder truck. The engineer's exam was by far the hardest exam in the city of Oakland, mainly because of the driver's component was extremely pass-fail derived, and also some of the pumping evolutions, like when you get a draft, if your fire stream wobbled at all, it was a fail. If you were pumping a 4-way and there was an interruption of flow to the engine you're pumping to, that was an automatic fail. If you touched a cone, it was an automatic fail. So like lots of people would take the engineer's exam, fail it repeatedly, then become eligible to take the lieutenant's exam and crush it and be like number 1 on the list, right? So like the engineer's exam, not only did you have to have good technical knowledge, you had to have like kind of a good day, right? You had to have a good day or be extremely skilled driver. So I promoted to, there wasn't enough engineers, so they were always getting mandatory. So once I was off probation, which again, this is going to sound weird to you, it was almost 24 months probation when I was hired. You did essentially 4 months in the drill tower, and you weren't a sworn member in the drill tower. So you were an at-will employee, so they could fire you at will.
Wow.
And then when you got sworn in after you graduated the drill tower, and then you had a full 18 months of probation. So there were so few engineers, and they were getting overtime so much. Like right when I got off probation, they're like, hey, you want to start driving? You have the city of Oakland required driver 1A and 1B from the state fire marshal's office. So I had that from my previous job. So I started driving engines fairly early in Oakland. And it's always a position that I liked. There's a level of freelance in the culture around the engineer's position. Probably the best job that I had in the city of Oakland was an engineer in a double house, because the truck that was across the floor was the busiest in the city. It was a 4-person truck instead of 5. And my officers in that company were very truck focused. And essentially, if the engine got on scene and I didn't need to run the pump, and my officer and 2 firefighters were going to go assist another engine with their hose layer or whatever, I swung as the 5th member over to the truck. So, I probably cut more holes as an engineer in the city of Oakland than when I was assigned to a truck, because I wasn't senior enough to get to the driver's position, and the driver cuts the hole. So I rode irons and I rode tiller, was the vast majority of time on a ladder company. But again, there was this weird kind of luck-based deal where I got hired when they hadn't hired anybody for like 5 years. So normally you get moved around the city on probation, but there were so many open spots in good double companies that if you went through on probation and an officer liked you, they would call up the chief and say, hey, how can I get this Dennis LeGear kid or Jason Stein or whoever it is, Maurice Miranda, how can I get them in my company permanently? Which you're not supposed to get a permanent assignment on probation, but many of us I ended up at Station 18, which is in East Oakland at 50th and Bancroft, and it had the largest truck district. I spent a lot of time on a truck, and it had a busy engine, and I still kept some of the run sheets. Like I think in '99, like there was 1,700 ladder responses, and they don't really run medicals. And there was 467 occupied working structure fires. So like, I was good. You were good for a fire shift, pretty. Again, that's another thing, people don't get the benefit of getting that type of fire duty. So people go like, hey man, like, why do you run the pump so good? Or why do you have all these known problems? Like, a lot of people, like if somebody runs over your 5-inch lead and damages it enough where the hydro pressure is spilling on the ground, if you leave your tank to pump in the open position and the nozzles are closed and you've lost your 5-inch lead, the water will drain out of the tank through the suction and out onto the street, because the water takes the path of least resistance. So like as a pump instructor, I always tell people, hey, once you get your positive supply, close your tank to pump, because now you own it. You're the banker. It's yours. If something happens to your supply, don't forget, turn off your suction, then reopen your tank. And then I got in the habit of marking all my discharges, right? Like who pulled it initially. That's usually good for one bottle. Where's it going? What floor is it on, and whether it's an interior line. Well, why did I start doing that? Well, I did have some idiot run over my 5-inch hose way around the corner, right, where I didn't realize that I had lost my supply. I was operating away from my engine. I heard something funny like cavitation from my engine. I went over and my 5-inch lead was soft and my tank water was gone, right? So it took me a while to figure out, like how I ended up getting a suction connection to an engine next to me to get their residual hydrant pressure and shutting my deal. And, guys were yelling on the radio that they're out of water and stuff like that. I'm like, this will never happen again. What do I need to do? Well, I wish I knew which one of these lines were interior, should have closed my tank to pump. And by the way, in 1993, NFPA 1901, they made that check valve mandatory. So static pressure or residual pressure on the low side of the pump will keep that clapper closed, right? Before, there were no tank fills on the rig. The tank suction was the tank fill. So you filled the tank from the bottom and you brought water out. So once you got a positive supply, guess what you always had to do? You always had to change your tank suction, because the water would just come out the top of the tank, right? So honestly, if they still did it that way, it might be better, right? You would always have a full tank, and you would always close it after you get a positive supply. But then I've learned some other things. I like, if I'm in a fire that is defensive, and I want to throttle up as much as possible, I'll leave my tank to pump open, and I'll keep twisting the throttle until the compound gauge is as low as possible. And what I'll be doing is I'm looking at my tank gauge, and once I start seeing a little water get pulled out of my tank, I know that there's no more available water. I back off the throttle a little bit, I fill my tank back up, and then I'll go like, hey, can I get another hydrant? Can I put another supply line between me and the hydrant? Can I get somebody to pump the hydrant? How can I improve? But essentially, I'm using that tank in the open position, that clapper valve, to act as a buffer, right? To act as a buffer. So if somebody starts flowing another master stream and my compound gauge now is low enough where my pump would be cavitating, my pump's not going to cavitate until I use all my
Right.
tank water.
Yeah, but at
Right? So
least
I
you can
use it.
watch, like you said, now you can watch your gauge and stuff and see, okay, I'm dumping out more than I'm taking in. That's one thing,
Yep.
like hydrant, we teaching hydraulics and working with the kids, like it's always telling them like you can always, pressure is not a thing. I mean, it is a thing, but it's not a thing. I can overcome pressure all day long. What I can't overcome is lack of volume. So, if we have, we'll have hydrants in town, like I'm sure Oakland does and stuff, 120 pound hydrants, or you'll have a 30-pound hydrant. Well, I don't care if I've got a 30-pound hydrant as long as it's got 1500 GPM available. I can work that all day long because I park an engine right to it. Now all of a sudden I have an unlimited pressure hydrant right next to the hydrant. I can push pressure and push water all day long if I need to. What I can't overcome is a 120-pound hydrant that's only got 500 GPM available. It's like, that's it. Sure, I got a ton of pressure, but what do I care? I can regulate my pressure. But with and that's the other thing, like you said, with driving and stuff, and when you spend time driving and learn the tricks and all the things, and overcoming too much pressure and understanding, your engine, right? If your engine adds 50 pounds of pressure in idle, right, and you've got 100 pounds coming in or 120 coming in, you're adding 50 in idle. So all of a sudden the guy at the end of the line's going, hey, gate me down, gate me down, gate me down. You can only gate that 1.75 inches down so much until you're pinching it. While all of a sudden
Yep.
it's like, okay, well, how do we as a driver say, well, how can I dump more pressure? Okay, well, maybe I open my tank fill and I could dump some pressure into there, or maybe I just shut down my intake, go off my tank water. I could regulate my pressure then when, as soon as it's get low enough on my tank, well, then be like, hey, I got to fill back up. Now we're going to fill up. We're going to, in playing that game and stuff. But it's like you learn those tricks when, like you said, when you're driving and you get that understanding of what's happening, what's going on, and
Yeah.
how to work with that kind of stuff.
One additional trick for a hot hydrant situation. So the more you gate a discharge, since the pressure pickups are now tied to the drain lines, and that's where they're reading pressure from, that's in the valve body. The further you gate, the less accurate your panel becomes. It'll actually read light. So it'll read, let's say you gate a 2.5, like 2/3 down, and you got a perfect 70 on the discharge, and you put a 2.5 inch inline gauge on the discharge, and the discharge will be 90, because when water travels quickly, sidewall pressure goes down, and when water slows back down, kinetic energy comes back, right? So like, I remember people going like, man, that 2.5 inch line felt like it was over pumped. I'm like, dude, I had you gated right at 70.
Yeah.
Then years later, I figured out, it's like, wait a minute. These newer rigs that have these drain line pressure pickups, right? Because I came in the fire service where they still used to drill a hole. They would put the pressure gauge right above the outlet, so it would self drain into that, and it would actually read true discharge pressure. So like, one of the things that I'm involved with now is, Ed Collette, the Ohio pump instructor, and me, we had a meeting at FDIC. It's like, hey man, how can we get people just to go to transducer gauges, because they're cheap enough now. The needle will never bounce. The line will never freeze. It'll never break. Like transducing semi, there's no moving parts. Like, and then now you can drill and you can put that transducer, like, hey man, you want the 2.5 inch rear outlet to read dead nuts what it actually is at the outlet? Drill a hole back there, put the transducer there, and you just need one wire to come to the pump panel, and you'll get true pressure every time. And now when you gate the valve, you'll always get an accurate outlet
Accurate
read,
reading.
right? So
Yeah.
like, those rigs that I've been involved with at Pierce and Spartan and stuff like that, where I have my own plumbing call outs and stuff, like, it's kind of nice. I just taught a class up in Clark County District 6. I helped them with their rig specs, and like I got to go there, and like the pressure gauges are dead nuts. The flow meters work perfectly. And it's not that people aren't buying good FRC flow meters and they're not buying good thulium gauges or class 1, whatever. It's the way they're installed, right? Garbage in, garbage out. And it's
So
gonna sound weird, but
what changed with the manufacturers? Like you said, they used to be, more accurate. What changed? What changed in
well,
the
like obsolescence engineering is kind of like a dirty word, right? Like, or streamlining stuff. Well, these manufacturers, some of the uh most expensive stuff is labor, right? So if they've made the drain bank on the bottom, and every now Akron, Elkhart, and Waters might not do it, but Akron and Elkhart valving has individual ports in the valve body for a drain any direction. So now they have this really heavy duty flexible drain line that can meet the 600 psi static test. It goes down to a drain, and they pick the hydraulic pickup from there. When they're punching the panel in the metal shop, they're just pumping. How many holes do we put at the bottom where? If you have an individual, remember those old hail pumps with the little black knob, the individual drain for each
Mhm.
each discharge, and then there was, on top of the discharge was the pressure gauge that had its own little hole drilled and it drains in. Yeah, that's a much better way to do it, but it's way more labor intensive, right? So some of this has to do with streamlining manufacturing processes. Other things which were a little bit surprising to me is, like, when I was in an argument with one of the engineers, actual mechanical engineers at a manufacturer that shall remain nameless, like, he's like, well, where did you learn this stuff? You don't have a degree. Like, I have a mechanical engineering degree from wherever, Berkeley. Like, I'm right, you're wrong. I'm like, that's not how any of this works. Like, you can have a mechanical engineering degree and you can be wrong and I can be right. And what I found out really quick is that when I made captain in Oakland, um, back to the hydrant thing, and this will show why this is important in just a second. When I made captain in Oakland, you're supposed to have a company officer project. I was lieutenant, then captain, and Oakland used to own all their own hydrants. They had 6,500 hydrants in the city, roughly. They had their own hydrant crew, and basically from the flange to the hydrant was the city hydrant crew. And we did something unique in Oakland. The bonnet on top was GPM, and the outlets with pressure. So a white bonnet meant 1,000, greater than 1,000 gallons a minute. A blue bonnet was 1,500 or better, and then you had the standard red 500 gallons, orange 500 to 1,000. The caps, a white cap meant it had between 50 and 100 psi static pressure in it, and a red cap meant it was under 50 psi, and a green cap meant it was over 120 pounds. Okay, so you could see these hydrants that were orange topped with green caps. So it was low volume, high pressure. Mm-hmm. Well, usually what that meant was Oakland's a hilly city. That hydrant happens to be at the very bottom of the zone. There's all that friction loss up to the tank that's supplying it. It has all that great head pressure, but that water has to make it through all that pipe through 200 feet, and it's going to eat up a lot of the kinetic energy. So, like, if you get close to one of the tanks, you'll see the opposite. You'll see a blue bonnet and red caps, and that's that hydrant that you're talking about. It's like, hey, man, it has all the water in the world. It's right next to the source. It's on a gigantic pipe. It just doesn't have a lot of head pressure behind it because it's right next to the tank, right? So when I was talking to these engineers, what I realized is, like, well, how do they test pumps at manufacturers? They test pumps at manufacturers at draft, right? They're not going to just go connect to a treated water supply and waste millions of gallons of water on some parking lot somewhere. They're building hundreds of rigs at a time. So all the major manufacturers have their own basically drafting ponds, where when you go do a final, like at Pierce, for example, and I always do this, not everyone does this, but if I've been hired as a consultant, like on the final, we're going to go to the drafting pond, and we're going to do every outlet, gated, ungated, look at where every pressure pick is. Did they build it right? Well, so the day came when I was in an argument with one of these guys, one of the manufacturers. We went to the drafting pond, and I said, okay, we put a RAM monitor on one discharge, and I supplied it with 2.5, and it needed like 180 pounds to get 80 at the tip. Then I took a 2.5 and put an 1/8" on it. It only needed 70 pounds, and then I did like an 1 3/4, needed 110 pounds, and I put individual pressure gauges on every outlet. So then you got to pump to the highest pressure. So I set the thing for 190. We got 500 gallons a minute out of the RAM monitor, and then I gated the 2.5 down till it said 70, and I gated the 1 3/4 down till it said 110. And then I had the engineer go look at the individual gauges on the discharges, and the panel on the 2.5 read 70, but it was almost 100 pounds at the outlet. And the 1 3/4 wasn't quite as bad. It was gated to 110, but it was like 125 at the outlet. And then of course the highest pressure one was full open, so it read fine, right? So it's the turbulence in the valve next to the pressure pickup that causes these light readings based on physics. So the guys from engineer powwow off to the side. Then they come back to me. It's like, we know what's going on, but why would you ever do this? How often does this occur on the fire ground? Why would you have?
Yeah, why would you gate these things down?
Yeah, why would you have lines at such different pressures? And then all the guys that were working there that were from like everybody like started laughing, like
yeah.
like every fire, like every
I was gonna say
every single time.
Last week we did.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. So
this is the difference between a dude that, like, you said, has a paper fancy degree, went to school and draws things on paper and does math, versus somebody that's like boots on the ground and actually does a shit and is like in it and understands how, like we understand where to put a step on a rig, and like this plastic part, we're going to break that in 5 minutes. Engineers like, nope, this is great stuff. That's the difference there, is you don't have no real world concept of what you're designing for the people that do. But I'm not smart because I didn't go to some fancy 4-year college or 8-year college or whatever. I don't got no piece of paper that says you're super smart. I just got common sense that says that's not going to work,
Yeah.
And I had this question written down before we started, and you just led into it so well. What should we all be doing with inline gauges and flow meters on our own apparatus? Because I think the fire service, we take a lot for granted. We believe what we're told.
Yeah.
But I think just in hearing what you're saying, we're way off on a lot of things. What would you suggest that we do to arm ourselves with the right knowledge if we have these?
Yeah, well, like there's often, like in urban fire departments that are fairly large, there's often like the committees that are fairly robust. And if you keep your mind open and you keep in network, the information can be transferred. The problem is that the fire service in general, if water's coming out of the nozzle, water's so effective, plus or minus 20 GPM one way or the other, is usually not that big of a deal. But now when we've kind of moved to GPM focused hand lines with low reaction force, they're very unforgiving to being overpumped, right? So people go like, like some of these engineers like, hey, nobody complained about this like in the mid 2000s or late 90s. And I'm like, well, everybody had 100 PSI nozzle. Mm-hmm. So if you have 100 PSI nozzle and you happen to have 1.5 inches and you need to pump at 140, well, guess what? Most hydrants are between 50 and 90 pounds at most. You idle at 40, you're never going to gate. Like 99% of the time, you're never going to gate, right? And one of the things when I invented the True ID 1 3/4, people were like, why is it so stiff? I'm like, well, you only have 50 pounds of nozzle pressure to help stiffen the line in the last length. And I would prefer, I like my hand line hose stiff and relatively unkinkable, right? And I like water traveling through it fast. And one of the things that I was really trying to do was to get a 35 PSI friction loss around 150, 160 gallons a minute, because 35 plus 35 is 70, and then you add 50, you're at 130. Now I'm like, okay, the governor will always work as designed for most people. You put it in PSI mode, you hit 130. If you get a hydrant that happens to be 80 and you end up with a pump discharge pressure at idle 140, no one's going to complain about an extra 10 pounds like that on that 1.75 inches. So my goal with True ID was not only to stiffen it, make it less kinkable, is that I wanted a net pump pressure that was high enough that in 90% of the fire departments in America, no one's ever going to gate their small line. And like, for example, I've done work with Key with hose designs. Key Combat Ready is very good hose, but it's, it's like 1.9 inches charged. It dry plugs at the factory 188. Well, if you run like a 7/8 inch tip on it and you're only putting 160 gallons a minute through it, the friction loss is like 20 psi per 100 feet or something remarkably low. But it also means that the water's not traveling very fast through the hose. So if you make a 10 or 15 pound error at the pump panel, the larger your hose size is for the flow in relation to flow, the more that pressure ends up at the nozzle. Something like True ID, if you make a 10 pound pressure error up and you're already flowing 160 gallons a minute, probably 7 pounds of that 10 pounds is going to be additional friction loss in the hose. So you might only get like a spike of 5 or 7 gallons at the end instead of the full 10 pounds making it to the nozzle. So like, one of the things that I'm trying to do now is increase nozzle mobility, and I know that the vast majority of the fire service is understaffed. So like when I made True ID 2.25, it was really for the lighter staff fire departments that they can't just add another company to the 2.5. And I wanted it mobile enough. I wanted a kink radius that will go through like a regular residential door. And I made it extremely stiff. Like Mercedes Super 2 is great hose. You can flow 265 in it all the time. It expands a little bit, but it's a little bit whippy. And I wanted that Freeman ratio 1.125 on a True 2.25, and it's stiff. Well, now, fast forward 8 years after, I think the True ID prototypes came out around late 2018 for 2.25, 2019. So now we're at least 5 years into True ID 2.25. Bill Gustin, rest in peace. Him and I love that Combat Ready 2-inch with 2.5 inch couplings. He wanted to run an 1.125 nozzle on it, but if you tried to get the full 265 out of it, it was like wrestling an angry cobra and want to hit you in the face. So he started under pumping it, but under, like Metro Dade Miami, they shoot for a 45 psi nozzle pressure, but it's very.
But then you can kink it,
the
though,
nozzle way out in front of you. You gotta have it choked up on, and there are still some issues. Well, now I can put a back pressure device that at 250 gallons a minute gives you 30 pounds of friction loss. I put that same 1.125 on there. So now it's 45 plus 30. I can do 250 with a 75 pound back pressure. And now I can have 2-inch hose that charges probably like 2.15 or something, or 2.2. And it's going to be even better than 2.25. But now I can get the full 250. And the thing that Gustin called me up right after I got him some lengths of True ID 2.25, a year and a half before they bought 2-inch Combat Ready with 2.5 inch couplings for the entire fire department. And you know how he had a kind of salty mouth on him. And he was cursing me up and down the phone. He's like, the 2.25 is so much better. There's no whip and no kink. He's like, why didn't you tell me this was coming? And I'm like, hey man, I don't own the factory. Bert Geithner and at the time, can't remember who the VP was at the time, but they're the owners, and looms print money. The longer you run them, the more they make money, and they're already operating at capacity. And then you have some guy that doesn't have an engineering background says, hey, I really think people want stiffer hose. And they said, I don't know what problem you're trying to solve here. And I'm like, 15 years ago, hey, everyone's going to 50 PSI nozzles. Now here's where Ray McCormick comes in with the force nozzle sizes, right? People go, hey, a 15/16 at 45 is 175 at 45, and it is 60 pounds nozzle action. Anybody can do that with a 15/16. That's true. You can do it. So I did that in Boise. I did that in Clackamas. And when I consulted for Richmond, Virginia with John Spanbauer, we also did 15/16 in those three agencies. The target nozzle pressure is 45, but it's so easy to accidentally overpump it. It's very tough to maintain that 45 psi. We solved that, Ray, me, and Hen. We have that orifice plate in there, and now it's not only extremely hard to overpump the nozzle, the nice thing, if you underpump it, the friction curve is exponential, right? So there's very little risk on the downside, and it gives you all this protection on the upside. And now you can get 250 gallons a minute at 45 through 2-inch hose and have absolutely no nozzle whip. Now, one thing people will say is, hey, it feels like there's a little more nozzle reaction. Well, there's less mass in the hose, right? There's less weight at the end of the hose. There's less surface area at the end of the hose. There's a couple physics things going on. But to me, there was an author named William Kimball that said, hey, smoothbore nozzles are best around 35 to 45. Let's focus on water application. And he really pushed that in the 50s and 40s. And even New York City had some low pressure nozzle evolutions like LA City still has. That's all from Warren Kimball. Well, the problem is when you drop nozzle pressure enough, you end up with a lot of kinks, right? You end up with a lot of kinks. Well, a back pressure device solves that.
Solves that, right?
It solves it. So like now I'm doing stuff where Sniper at 25 PSI is like 150 gallons a minute. Combat Ready 2-inch at 25 PSI is like 250 gallons a minute. So now my pump chart's this. All hand lines are 25. I've put a back pressure device in the nozzles. All nozzle systems are 75. So there's absolutely no pumping difference between your small and large hand line. Then I can do like 3-inch at 20 PSI per 100 for a ram monitor at 500 gallons a minute. That nozzle pressure is 80, right? So now on the fire ground, let's say I have 200 feet of 3-inch out, 20 plus 20 plus 80. Okay, that's
120.
120, right? So then I do my 2-inch 25 plus 25 plus 75, 125. My 1.75 inch, 25 plus 25 plus 75. Okay, 125. Okay, do I need to gauge shit now?
No. You say
So
that,
I can literally now, because of this technology, I can create, if I go to a fire department and consult with them and say, hey, you go to 4-inch, 4-inch is 20 PSI per 100 feet at 1,000 gallons a minute. Your 3-inch is 500 gallons a minute at 20 PSI. And all of your hand lines are 25 PSI per 100 feet and 75 pounds at the nozzle, right? So now, like, you don't even need a pump chart anymore. Hey, can you remember that the 3-inch is 20 and the 4-inch is 20 and all your hand lines are 25? And look at this. If the back pressure device makes the nozzle system 75, and we know that the master stream nozzle on a ram's 80, right? It's essentially within 5 pounds.
Yeah.
You'll never have a pumping problem on a fire ground again. And you're getting very mobile devices. Like when I stretch a ram monitor, I always bring 2 couplings forward, right? Bring 2 couplings forward because you might shut it down and move it forward or left and right. So I treat it like a big hand line. So now from 150 gallons a minute to 250 gallons a minute to 500 gallons a minute. And by the way, it's going to sound weird. I like the math. The large mobile hand line flows 100 gallons more a minute than the small hand line. The next bump up flows double the large line. So like, it's that escalation of force that I like to see, right? So, and the pump chart's incredibly smart. So smart and simple. And none of this would be possible without Hen. Like I had the idea, they milled it, they machined it. By the way, 3D printing, like Elkhart takes advantages of it with the bent tip and the high-rise nozzles and everything. 3D printing and what's occurred in the manufacturing world as far as cost to scale stuff and mess and experiment with stuff, it's completely different. Like there's going to be all sorts of new things coming in the fire service that are extremely valuable that just would not have been possible maybe 10 years ago, so we didn't really go down these questions very well.
No, it's like we're just running this through, and it's like, well, there's just so much. It's just soaking it in and stuff. But you, when you were going back to talking about your the 1 3/4 lines and the 15/16 and stuff, and I know this is some of your other stuff. You're talking like that 15/16 because of that Freeman, right? That
Yeah.
Freeman formula and stuff. That basically that size line or that size nozzle works best on that 1.88 inside diameter hose on your 1 3/4 versus like a 1.75. It's almost like that 1.75 is a little bit too small a hose for the
There's a
size
little
orifice.
bit of misconception around this, right? So the Freeman ratio, obviously, it's half the diameter hose is the ideal nozzle at 50. That works for hose. That ratio really only gives you tube velocity, right? So I could take 188-inch hose that was made for high pressure, 100 psi nozzles, and I can put a 15/16 on it, and it'll be a whippy mess. But the flow in the hose will be the 21 feet per second that Freeman was after, right? Um, the nice thing about the back pressure device is like you can take that 15/16, you can make it flow 175 at 45, have a 75-pound back pressure, and then people go like, well, what about the Freeman ratio? Well, it's 175 gallons a minute, so it'll be in hose that's close to 1 3/4. Maybe the tube velocity will be a little bit high, but on hose that is 188, you're flowing 175. It's going to be like 20 feet per second. So like the goal is 21 feet per second, but essentially there's a range that's functional, 19 to 23 feet per second. So the whole idea behind the raise 175 at 45 force using that back pressure device is he wanted to make a nozzle system that, regardless of your hose size and the quality of hose, whether it's lightweight, medium weight, or heavy duty, or how it's designed, that any fire department in America can instantly go to a GPM focused low nozzle reaction and not have the kinking and not have the whipping, and then through attrition buy better and better hose. I don't want someone to listen to this podcast and say, and I'm going to use Eco 10 because I've done consulting with Key. Eco 10 Key will probably never stop making. It's not that they want to make it. It's just a lot of fire chiefs go, hey, I need green 1 3/4. We need 1,000 lengths, and we're going to go out to bid. We're out to bid like this. It needs to be NFPA compliant, and it needs to be green. So hoses, it's you manufacture by the pound and you sell by the foot. So essentially raw materials in. So a good low pressure hose has more rubber in it, more weave, more things. So it has to be more expensive per foot. So that bid's going to come back with like whatever, some hose from China, some hose from Key like Eco 10, something like 8D from Snap Tight, right? And it's NFPA compliant, right? So why does that hose exist? It's because the fire chief, the logistics chief, they keep buying it. It's not that Key wants to make lightweight hose that needs 100 psi back pressure to keep it from kinking. It has less material in it, so it'll wear out quicker, it'll burn through quicker, it's more susceptible to thermal damage, mechanical damage on the fire ground. I don't want somebody to take a turbo or a forced shutoff or whatever and say, hey, we can now buy low bid hose in perpetuity. What I want people to do is say, be able to go to their chief, hey, chief, you know how you want us to flow more water and put more fire out and have an easier handline to move? We can do that now with our existing 1 3/4 fleet. And then next year we have so many lengths go out of service. Now, instead of having to buy 1,000 lengths at a time, let's say we're only buying 250 lengths at a time, buy 250 lengths, make it red. Hey, the red hose goes next to the nozzle. Yeah. The next year you buy another 250 lengths. The 2 lengths of red hose go by the nozzle. How do I know this is the way it works? When I consulted for Duluth and they were moving to low pressure nozzles, all of a sudden some of the companies realized the old Pond Supreme hose handled the low pressure nozzle better. Guess what started to happen? All of the old beat up hose ended up where? Next to the nozzle. All the new hose that wasn't very good at low pressure stuff ended up back by the rig. Same thing happened in the Denver Fire Department when I was involved with the Denver Fire Department. those were called clues. Like they go, Dennis, you're so smart. It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I remember hose that was stiffer. Some of these guys are seeing the old hose works better. One of the engineers at Key said when they were making Cheer ID, they're like, this hose is like straight from the 70s. Like, like it. And I'm like, yeah, it works. It works well. So we've come full circle back to this box discussion, right? Yeah. Inside the box was always this heavy, durable hose. But when they went to 100 PSI nozzles, guess what happened? They could use a lighter weight hose that folds flatter. So all of a sudden, what's the premium on a fire engine during the introduction of EMS? Compartment space.
Yeah.
The lighter the hose is, the more it can lay flat. All of a sudden, you need less and less space for hose, right? So the 100 PSI nozzle conversion in the 70s to 80s caused the problem of cross lays and tight speed lays and all that stuff, because the old hose that worked with 50 PSI nozzles would never fit in that space, right? It would never fit in that space. So it's kind of like everything's kind of glued together. There is a continuum of knock-on effects. And when I consult with an agency, like I always tell them, like sometimes I get hired by an agency and they want to rig the way they want it built. And I'm like, like I've even sent checks back. Like I said, hey, we've had a couple meetings. You guys are going a different way. Not even my philosophy. It's like against my DNA. Like, hey, like, like I'm not gonna, like I don't need the money. I think you're a great fire department. Here's your check back, but like you're building a Franking wagon that I don't want my name associated with.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've done a lot with this, and a lot of us are understanding hose and nozzle as a package, and you talk about the gold standard in water movement, and you've had that. You've talked about the fire stream triangle.
Yep.
You've done a lot of those, and I think we focus a ton on the discharge side. Is there anything that we should really know and think about on the intake side?
So back to that thing that he was saying. Where Justin McWilliams works, the kind of search culture guy.
Yep.
There's a captain there named Pat Dunn, not the Pat Dunn from Kansas City. That's also a great captain. Good.
Yeah, we had him
dude.
on the show. We had him on the podcast too.
But this guy, this is a lesson for everybody in the fire service. The vast majority of true pipe hitters, A people, where they have very specific skill sets, like a guy that's ridden irons on a ladder forever, he's never going to go out and teach. He's taught the guy that like the Cody Trescal learned that stuff from somebody that will never, like they're a family man.
Mm-hmm.
They come, they're the irons on the truck. They practice. They're great. They know all their stuff, and it's a concentrated knowledge. And that's going to be, so Pat Dunn's one of these guys in Clackamas that, it's concentrated knowledge around hose and nozzle packages. But when I was there, I was helping them go to low pressure nozzles and kind of unwind the KINT program. And they ended up having a lot of hydrants that were over 100 PSI. And they were moving to 15/16, and they wanted it to be 45, and their hose was kind of oversized. And I was like, often you only need 90 pounds for a 200-foot crosslay, or 85 pounds to make it work, just like Richmond, Virginia. And so when they would do their changeover, they would have to gate heavily, and then things would go south. And so like I called up Hale, Waterous, and Darley, and they were a Waterous department. Waterous's split shaft is driven by a chain, and the chain is oil bathed at the bottom. And Hale is a set of rotating gears, and the bottom gear is also oil bathed. So as long as the gear is turning, the drive mechanism for the pump is being lubricated. So I said, well, what about instead of gating your intake or trying to scrub some pressure off it by opening your tank fill, why don't I leave the rig and pump, but open the door and just push neutral? Am I going to damage the pump? I don't want to get sued. Like I carry P&L insurance, but like I don't want to ever have to use it. I try to give good information. So I called all the pump manufacturers and said, hey, is it okay to have the pump engaged, but it not being driven by the motor? it's still going to turn. Is anything going to get damaged inside the pump? And universally, they all said no. Like there's no problem. So that's always my first move. If I have a net pump pressure issue and I know that my hydrant, I look at my compound gauge. If my compound gauge is above my required discharge pressure, I push neutral. It's the easiest thing to do. And then if I need to, I'll go back and push drive and gate if I'm going to run a master stream or something like that.
Yeah.
There's also other stuff that I've done. I've kind of built this thing called the ultimate booster backup intake. It's the auxiliary intake on the driver's side. It's teed. So you have one line go up to act as a tank fill, and then you have one piece of plumbing go to the 6-inch connection on the pump body.
Okay.
Just like a normal auxiliary. On the line that goes up to the tank, I put an Akron autofill on there. And then on the line that's going to the pump, I have the regular auxiliary swing valve, right? So now when they get a supply, if they're doing booster backup, they drive in and they throw out their hose. The next engine in just gives them their tank water. They hit autofill. It's going to keep their tank completely full without dropping a single drop of water on the ground, right? And they're never going to have a net pump issue. So then let's say another rig shows up, lays away from engine 2 to a hydrant, and engine 2 all of a sudden now has to do a master stream evolution, and they're pumping at 180. Well, there's going to be 180 pounds coming to that auto tank fill, and it's just going to keep that tank full. So that first engine's never going to have a net pump pressure issue, ever. And it took me a while to get it right with the baffles and stuff, but I can have a 700 to 800 gallon a minute flow through, right, in that setup. So for the rural environment, but I'd also say for the urban environment, like I'm a big fan of booster backup. Like to me, I don't know why all the people don't do that, right? It's very, very low cost. The autofill's a couple $100. The extra plumbing's like maybe $300 or $400. Sometimes when I'm consulting, and one thing that I always caution fire chiefs and people that hire me, like I'm like, I'm going to save you far more than what I'm going to cost you. But once we get to the paint schemes and stuff at pre-construction, I have no say. Like if all of a sudden you black out a rig and you have powder coat, I see people add 50, 100 grand to rig costs regularly at the last stage, paint, decal, and chrome, and it doesn't do anything for performance. And I'm kind of like, me and Rick Mosier, we're kind of traditionalists. Like I don't like tons of chrome, I just want some chrome, and I want it to be fucking red. Like that's it. Like I don't want anything. These things look like to me, like if I was a little kid and I saw an all blacked out fire engine, it looks like a hearse or like a funeral thing. It doesn't bring the same shiny stuff that I remember from my childhood, the shiny fire engine.
What are your feelings on the yellow ones? What do you like,
Yeah. So like the yellow probably never should have happened, but there's like very interesting science that people like. It said here, like, what do you see in the next big evolution? Lighting is not my thing. Like I know where my expertise are. So when I consult on a rig, I'll use Taylor Goodman, who was on the Henrico apparatus committee, but now he's the deputy chief of Powhatan, Virginia, or Rick Mosier, has been a captain forever there in Olathe. They know exactly all the different lighting packages, but there is a known scientific study that an optometrist weighed in on that said, why are these firefighters getting hit on car accident scenes? And you'll see the video, like the car will come and it will like drill the firefighter like straight center car, and it gets caught on camera, and they'll be in court and they'll like, didn't you see the firefighter? He was right in front of you. And like it's a car accident, they're in their little like glowing vest. This will blow your mind. If I put a pair of glasses on that inverts the image, right, in about 24 to 72 hours, your brain's going to go, this isn't right, and it'll flip the image over. Then you take the glasses off, and now everything's going to be upside down. And another 24 to 72 hours, the image will flip again. So it's your brain that processes what the rods and cones do. The brain is smart enough, when a rod and cone is oversaturated, it will actually turn off. It'll stop processing parts of your visual field. It'll sacrifice a blind spot so you can still see stuff around you. So when those people are in court and they say they didn't see the firemen,
They
they didn't
literally
see them.
didn't
They
see
didn't
it.
see 'em.
They
Yeah.
literally didn't see them. And I'll keep waiting for NFPA to go back and unwind some of this reflective stuff. These aren't like
Is it
question marks. These are known facts. Like
is it
these
the
are
reflective vests and stuff, or is it that with the addition of the
it's
LEDs? Everything's the
it's
LEDs. Those
everything
LEDs are
combined
so
is just
bright.
making
It's
it
just
worse
crazy. Yeah.
and worse and worse.
Well,
And
it looks at
anybody
like,
who's been
why do you need now where they have the option for your LEDs when you're on senior in park for so long that it automatically dims the lights? Well, why do we
yeah,
have to dim
so
the lights? Well,
correct,
they're too
right?
bright, right?
So like battalion chiefs, when I'm consulting on rigs, they often complain about when they're chasing an engine, like they can't see anything. So like you can now you can have it like when you're in gear, you can have the lights facing rear at a different intensity than the lights facing forward and stuff like that. But I would say America's very good at more is always better,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we've gone off the deep end with reflective this and lighting package that. I mean, anybody who's been around a modern fire engine that has every single lighting option on it, it's like, you're constantly blinded, like wherever, to the point now where they have done, and I would say wheeling's probably on the cutting edge of the ability to customize some of the stuff on the rigs, but then you got to buy, and again, lighting's not my thing. There's a wheeling package where it all can talk to each other, and you can
Yeah, and they
individually
can
set
sync. Everything can sync up.
Yeah,
think
your
Stuff.
everything.
your new rigs are getting
I think our new rigs are. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're kind of
very
looking at getting
expensive.
that. Yeah.
Very, very, very expensive. Like those are
Yeah.
very expensive. But essentially, too much of a good thing's also bad.
Well, we're the country that has like came up with the triple baconator with extra bacon and stuff too, right? So I mean, like everything in excess, because if a little bit's good and a lot's better, that's but that's a firefighter thing though too, right? Because a little bit's good, lots better. I don't even know, Cap, like on this list, like I mean, because I know we're held to like 2 hours for you, and there's so much here to still, like, I mean, we could talk
Let's
like
let's just
forever,
let's just hit the UL
What
stuff
do you want
just
to?
for
Yeah, let's what's
let's
important.
just hit
Yeah,
that for a second.
yeah.
So essentially, I got hurt. I got retired, early. My line deal. I was too young. I started in the fire service when I was 20, essentially, and 38. It's like, okay, like
Oh,
I'm not going to do 12 years doing nothing, right? And the city was very generous. I have no complaints. I was treated very fairly. So I needed to do something. So after my surgeries and I got back to health, I started teaching at a community college, and I started realizing that a lot of the knowledge that I got from people like Jay Camella, who got it from people like Tommy Stinson. Tommy Stinson is one of those guys where he was a nozzleman his whole life in Oakland. He always worked in busy companies. And, it looked like when he was handling a hand line, it looked like, somebody who was like, it was like professional dancing or something. Like, he was fantastic. Nozzles open early and fast. It's always working in a very aggressive pattern. He's in training here. It's on straight stream. Like he was extremely good. Well, then I started teaching at community colleges after I was retired, helping friends with Firefighter One academies, helping people spec rigs. And I'm like, people don't understand coverage. Like they don't understand where the nozzle is, why you want to train air, how to work angles. And I started. So if I was 10 years older and instead of 2010, I was retired in 2000, no one would know who I was, right? So like I got retired right when Facebook was coming along. I didn't even like Facebook. So all of a sudden I realized that, hey, a lot of the knowledge that I'm taking for granted now that I'm teaching at college, it's not in the textbooks. It should be in the textbooks. And there's a lot of people doing a lot of wrong things because they don't have the fire duty or they didn't have the mentorship, right? And so I started getting involved in just like putting stuff up into the ether, right, on the internet. And then all of a sudden I met like people. So there's what I would call, there's a group of us that were early adopters of Facebook and social media and emails. And I had all of this before. Like I was on Dave Furnell's email listserv forever. And I read his book early, and he's one of the people that has definitely influenced some of my knowledge. But, and then Andy Frederick's obviously died in 9/11. So I had all this kind of like I'll tell you something that's a little bit sick. I've saved every email that I've ever sent fire service wise, and I organize everything by state and department. And
Wow.
I checked about 4 years ago, and it was like 60,000
Yeah, that's
emails.
disgusting. You're like, that's on another level. I don't even
Yeah.
like,
So
I
I
like,
think I
you know,
probably like I'm approaching 100,000 emails. Like
that's
if I was
crazy.
Hillary Clinton, I'd definitely be in jail. You know, if I
Gmail is probably like pissed, like, dude, why is this guy eating up all the server space on
yeah.
these emails,
So
man?
so all of a sudden, like I basically, lost the thing that I cared about the most, and I wanted to stay involved. And the UL, John Cirillo knew Daryl Liggins, and when they were the Vandalia fire and the wind stuff, they were kind of talking, and I kind of got inserted in that. So when the fire stream study came around, I was talking about like, hey, the most important thing is surface cooling. And people were like, you're crazy. And I'm like, the most important thing is the way you work the nozzle, and and I put out a lot of stuff, and I think Steve Kerber, when he was no longer when he wasn't director, but he was low there, had picked up on some of this stuff. So so when I put my application in, even though I had been retired, I had been instructing, and I had a pretty good footprint as a hose and nozzle instructor, not as large as Aaron now. Aaron's, basically like, it's ridiculous, right? Like it's ridiculous. But I had a pretty good reputation, and I got pulled for that study, and that study to me was the study that should have been done in tandem, right? Everybody said interior exterior study. It really wasn't. We almost did no exterior experiments. There was like 17 interior experiments, only like 7 exterior experiments, because something that I realized is like when they were doing the exterior water stuff, I'm like, hey, the vast majority of fires that I've gone to, all of the ones that are in multiple family dwellings, or all the ones that are in remote areas, or SOR cut up Victorians and stuff, exterior water is not even an option. Like, if you have a fire on the 3rd floor, you can't charge a hand line on the ground and
Right.
then move it to the 3rd floor. You got to dry stretch to either the 2nd floor if the hallway's dirty, or if the hallway's clean, you dry stretch up. So, and the reflex time of not allowing those people to start the stretch that's going to ultimately put the nozzle at the seat of the fire, you can't have that first company do an exterior water flow, even if it's right there. You have to let them be free. So I was looking at a lot of the study. I remember talking to guys. I go like, what am I doing right? Should I be moving the nozzle clockwise, counterclockwise? Does it matter? Should it be a squash there or whatever? And like, I think that's why I got pulled for that study. When they reviewed all the people that were in it, like I had some positions in my statement that were like nozzlemanship is extremely important, and you should not be using heat. And again, another weird thing with Oakland, when I got there, they were still in wool pants and boots for
Wow.
responses. So like opening the lineup early was just a necessity.
I
And
said,
I
like,
remember I tried to, and we had no hoods. I tried to wear my bunker gear to every call when I was on the engine. They would leave you in the station, because they would hang the jacket on the rig, and basically you would just mount the rig and put your jacket on, you're ready to go, right? So like you had no chance. So I had to eventually, I'm in Rome, do as the Romans do, right? And then I realized, man, there's a lot of benefit here. It's easier. I'm not getting overheated on the fire ground. I can climb ladders better. But man, I better not put my knee down on the ground in hot water, or I'm going to get burned, right? But the other thing that I noticed right away in Oakland is the reach of the stream was always a priority. Like they never got, you see guys flake line on the onto the porch, and then they get beat up by a screen door or something, or the truck's trying to work around them. That never happened in Oakland, because like you didn't want to be close to any of the fire. Like you put 2 couplings up on the step, you bring the nozzle back, and you'd ask for water, and then you would use the reach of the stream to soften the bay window, or if the porch is on fire, then you would move forward. Essentially, we were less protected. The less protection bred all of those good nozzle techniques and flow techniques. Now, if you can get that person to behave like that, and then put them in a full PPE envelope, now you have some tactical advantage, right? Like if you fall through the floor, or if it has to be a hard push. I think one of the biggest problems people make on difficult fires where you're trying to find the seat or you're trying to get around some furniture is that they keep the nozzle closed for far too long. The initial flow is
Yep.
way too delayed.
Yeah.
And that just was not a thing in Oakland. Like you would see guys routinely flow from like the front yard, soften a couple things up and go in. And that always bugged me too with the Governor Island study. You would see a video of like a Philadelphia fire engine in a row house, and there would be like fire just blazing out of the first floor. And like right after that front door is opened, you're in the fire room. And then you would see some guy like a Philadelphia fireman just start flowing in those windows, like knock the piss out of it, go to the door, and then move in, and then slowly work their way up. And then some keyboard commander is like, "Well, nice transitional attack." I'm like, that's not a transitional attack. Like, that's putting water where you're going next. Transitional attack to me is where you intentionally choose. That's water application by condition. Transitional attack to me is where a properly staffed fire department with the right equipment and everything, they wouldn't even bother with the exterior water. They would just go in. Transitional attack is by choice, right? It's by choice. So there's so many videos out there where you see like every window issuing fire and somebody does a deck gun hit or they do a 2.5-inch hit. Then they go in and someone will say, "Nice transitional attack." I'm like, I got a clue for you. That's the way it's always been done.
Yeah.
Right. It's always, you can't go into a fully involved room. Right. You either crack the door and apply some water in, or you apply water through one of the first 4 windows, but you're not going in there. Right. So Oakland had that DNA in them because they were lightly protected. San Francisco is very much the same. LA City was kind of the same. So I think that's why I got picked. The thing that pissed me off about the study the most is we never got into 2-story fires, and we kind of ran out of money. And I think they thought it was going to be easy. So they let a group of us, through a voting of our peers, go on to the coordinated attack study, which moved to the commercial. The very last set of experiences were strip mall burns. And I started realizing, we did some water mapping and drop ceilings in commercial things, and it was like, this doesn't work very well. And I always did a series of stacked Z's in commercials, and there's a whole technique that I do different than residential application. And I got to insert that in that coordinated attack study. And then when I saw the hen nozzles later after that study, and I call a commercial box fire, where you have a larger interior space, whether it's a strip mall or something bigger, it's a low distribution environment. And nozzle, it's very easy to miss the fire. Like, you can flow through a window. The stuff that's between the window and the center of the strip mall unit is what's burning, and your smoothbore stream is going through the flame front. You've extinguished everything back here, but there's no change at the window because the fuel package closer to the window is still burning. So even back, 25 years ago, I used to stagger my lines. If everyone had to be on the A side and someone was pulling another line, we damn well sure weren't going to be next to each other. Like, someone's going to be 15 feet, 20 feet in front of it, because you're trying to get different coverages, right, inside, and half bailing. So, like, something new that I think that's going to occur in the fire service is that these bladed patterns will probably be produced by multiple manufacturers eventually, and that we're going to see fires that we were losing in what I call reasonable large spaces. So let's say 10,000 square feet and below, ceiling heights 30 and below. The non-sprinklered older buildings that are often losers, they're going to become winners. And there's going to be a lot more tactical anti-venting. Like, instead of cutting a gigantic roll-up door right away, you'll have people open the man door, apply some water. If they can, cut the lock, raise the roll-up door. Because there's a lot of rapid vent profile changes that are occurring on commercial fire grounds that need to occur eventually, but they can't be pre-water application. They got to be in tandem, or better yet, post water application. So that's the new thing. Like, if we're here at the 2-hour mark, and the 3-minute close. Like, I think the new thing for me, like, I have a commercial fire class that I give. I'm not looking for work, but I'm going to teach up a set of cadres to teach my information and let them get out there and go with it, because I really, there's a lot of good things occurring in the fire service, and I only see opportunity for advancement around all of the new research, all of the new hose and nozzle stuff, better pump controls in the future. And this shouldn't surprise anybody, right? Like, what invented the interior fire attack? Did the SCBA invent the interior fire attack, or did the interior fire attack invent the SCBA? The interior fire attack invented the SCBA. The failings in commercial structures that we've documented over and over again are going to lead to different strategy and tactics and stream application techniques and ventilation techniques in commercials that will lower the risk profile and increase the property preservation, right? The whole goal of a commercial fire attack is, hey, the product's gone. Like, anything in the building, touch the smoke and everything, is the building intact enough where they can throw all the product out, fix the roof, clean stuff up, and get back into business in 2-3 months? Or is it a 4-year hit to the city's taxes? Is that business gone for 4 years? And this adds up to significant amounts of money for these communities, right?
It does.
So, property counts. I'm not asking for people to up their risk profile on commercials. I think there's a way that we can up our success and lower our risk profile through diligent research and diligent advancements in water application. And I think it's all coming. Like, I think it's coming. And I think competition's good. Like, I think Elkhart, Akron, TFT, and now, like, yeah, I'm glad there's this back pressure device. I'm glad put some pressure on these other companies to do some good stuff. That's the way capitalism works. And I'm a big fan of those competitive pressures.
Oh yeah, that's how a free market is. That's what drives everything.
I want to give Phil the final question, but I just want to say thank you. I think, especially as a chief officer, people like yourself sharing knowledge with us, that's the only way we're going to make things better. And I've been able to hear you today and talk with you, and Daryl Liggins, you mentioned, I was with him about a month ago, so greatly appreciated. Just wanted to pass that on, and on to Phil.
Yeah, Dennis, hopefully we can, because I know we're out of time and there's just so much to unpack here. I mean, but best advice that you've been given through your career, and any advice, what kind of advice would you give to new firefighters coming in, new and old?
Oh, wow.
I mean, that might take a little bit, but I mean,
that's a tough question. But to me, this has taken me a long time, so it's recently processed, but probably offered to me many times in the past. Is like, hey, don't take yourself too seriously. Keep an open mind. When somebody is pushing back, where their perspective. I've told fire chiefs, if I get hired to come do something significant in your fire chief, and it doesn't seem like a beehive's been kicked over, your fire department has larger problems. Like, if you can show up and change everything and nobody says a word, those people are just there for their paychecks. So a lot of this, people get frustrated, like, especially with the why thing. Like, when I told people, hey, the whys are dumb. I used to be a why guy, and then we moved to modern flows, and I had to go back and unteach stuff that I teach, right? I was humble enough to go back, and often I would do it for free. I'd go back and say, hey, let me teach you a static bed. This is a better way to do business. Whys don't really work with modern flows, right? So many people took a bite out of me. Like, I took it so personally that it was, probably affecting my health, like high blood pressure, feeling stressed out, and like, having these constant battles. Like, I'm not a person. I want people to like me. That's kind of a weakness. It could be a strength, it could be a weakness. But don't take yourself too seriously. Keep an open book. And when you find yourself like screaming or in a passionate discussion with somebody, try to see the other perspective. And I would say that most of the people that get in arguments with me in fire departments that I'm consulting for, what they honestly feel is that the change that I'm recommending will make them less effective at their job. They're not just assholes, right? They have done suppression in their locale in this way, and they've done it for 20 years, and they don't see how changing these little things are going to make a big difference, right? So then it's up to you to have a civil discourse. But to me, if you are in a room where everybody agrees, you're not going to learn anything. You're not going to learn anything. So like you need to keep people, Daryl, Jay, and we've all argued about the back pressure device and bladed patterns and like all those things. Like I flew out to Detroit and gave one to Dave Furnell. Like, like I everything needs to be processed, and you need to be able to do it in a way where it's analytical without judging the other side harshly or yourself harshly. And I can tell in the last 5 years, like people go like, hey, he's a lot nicer guy now, right? I'm much less my way or the highway. I'll go like, I think my way is better. Let me try to show you why. And then we'll use your way. We'll see why, right? So, and I think that's important. So don't fear passionate discussion. Make it civil discourse, and always understand that you might be in the wrong, right? And there's definitely things that I've gone back and corrected, right? The true judge, the way Ray and I have talked about it, hey man, I told people we're going to get steamed, and when I looked at the water data, they had to use a laser because relative humidity is basically 100% inside a structure fire. Have you ever noticed your face piece gets water on it right away before the lines open? Well, that's because smoke is wet. And a lot of those lines on the wall, the relative humidity is already at 100%. Guess what happens to relative humidity as you're extinguishing the fire? It goes down, not up. That's why as you put your fire out, you notice you get less condensation and stuff on your face piece. It's because the environment's getting drier because a product of combustion is actually water vapor, right? I was 100% wrong on that. Once that was done in the UL fire attack study and it was evident that I was wrong, I told everybody I was wrong and I moved on. However, that being said, you can't listen to people that are constantly changing. So if I say if my life is 100 PowerPoint slides and I have 5 PowerPoint slides I've needed to go back and change, 95% of my shit was good, right? If you run into somebody that's changing PowerPoint slides and changing opinions on a regular, they're probably not very good at their job.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, Kev, I can't, like I said, this was a ton. We packed, I don't even know what into, like, it feels like a suitcase. We crammed so much in, and there's still so much. I mean, we could go on for hours and stuff, like just the amount of stuff we've covered. We still got a lot we could have. So we appreciate, I tell you what, I can't even tell you how much we appreciate you taking your time and sit with us and stuff. This for us, you might not think it's a big deal because of the people you consult with, the people that you've name dropped and have worked with and stuff. For us here, for this little #1 Iowa based fire service first responder podcast, for us this is a big deal. So we truly appreciate your time tonight.
It's been a privilege on this end too, for people to elevate me to this platform that I've been elevated to, and to be able to listen and talk to the manufacturers and stuff like that. So, I don't take it for granted. So I would say it's likewise on you're giving me a platform here. You asked about hen nozzles. Aaron called me. Aaron say, hey, what problem is this solving? I'm like, it's because everyone hears that saying from me, like, if you can insert a constant where there's a variable, insert a constant.
Yep.
Well, people forget that the biggest variable is the human variable, and the bladed pattern is a correction for weak stream application, which can occur even with the greatest guy. You run into a victim, it's a hoarder's house or whatever. So the return on investment in the bladed pattern, helping you do coverage better, it's concentrated, capturing the gases better, sealing a hallway better. It's fixing the human variable, right? And the human variable is one of the hardest things to address. So, that's what I told Aaron, Aaron would prefer to teach every nozzleman perfect technique and that they're going to practice and they're going to stay healthy. I just don't see that as something that's realistic. You know, like I definitely am not taking anything. No one's done anything like what Aaron's done in the fire service. But that being said, you take someone that's good and you give them a bladed pattern, it makes them excellent. Take someone that's excellent, it makes them outstanding. The shit bag will never be good, but you can take someone that's adequate and get them good performance. And where is this true? Why is there anti-locking brakes on cars? Why is there stability control? Why is there automation inside plane cockpits, right? It's an automated way to get a better application regime, right? Yeah. So you take your wins where you can get them, right? Don't pass judgment too quickly. These aren't gimmicks. These companies are, these Elkhart, TFT. Now TFT, they're a machine shop, and who knows? Like I'm only a consultant. Hen might make something that I don't like, and I won't wreck. If I make an engine, well, actually I'll do SCBAs. If I make an SCBA, I was on the SCBA committee in 2000. I liked the MSA face piece. I liked the wire harness from Scott. I liked the bottle retention system from MSA. If I could, I would make Franken MSCBA. You just can't do that, right? None of those things go together. So like the nice thing about building an engine is like, hey, you can use water as valving. You can use a hail pump. You can kind of pick and choose what you do on a rig. The hose and nozzle, is not like that once you're flowing. So, it's good. Like it's definitely a privilege on my end too. And thank you for having a podcast. Like, I know you guys aren't making a ton of money from this.
Yeah. Well, I guess a guy comes in on his off day, he gets a little overtime. So it's not, I mean, we're fortunate, for us too, for our fire department, for our department to sponsor the, to allow us the time. Like I'm on shift today. They allowed me, the AC, our operations allowed me time off to come and do this. So, I mean, we have so much department support. It's fantastic. So it allows us to do this, equipment, and then making the context of relationships that we are and stuff. So it allows us, it gives us that platform too. And for us, this podcast is Aaron's, Dunn's, like we're a department that's kind of in transition right now. We've got 4 new engines we're specing out, or 3. And then we've got new hose now too, with it going with the, key hose and nozzles and stuff. And we're in that, where we're learning and we're kind of changing those things. If it's been, we've done things for 100 years the same way because that's the way it is. While we're finally kind of, and it's people like yourself and others that are, you put the ideas, the stuff out there, so then our guys find it, and then we can take it and start chewing on it and making some changes and seeing some things that are going to be positive for everything.
All of my knowledge is for sharing. Like I don't really keep anything.
And that's awesome.
Thanks again. If you have any questions about your engines, if you're going to pre-construction, you have my cell phone number and email. So I'm more than happy to provide any sort of guidance that I can within reason, obviously. And please have a good night. Thank you very much. But I'm going to get kicked out of here. I'm looking out. I think I'm going to.
They're like, get out. So,
yeah.
All right.
Thanks, sir.
We're going to drop them.
Thank you.
Yep.